When I initially saw the collection, I just thought, wow, this is a field day.
There was everything and nothing matched. They were from different eras, different styles.
It felt like home. I collect bric-a-brac and bits and pieces and use them around the house and for bits of art, and so it was entirely familiar.
Peter Madsen, his estate came to us. It was obviously money, but it was also a house, and it was his collection. We were obviously delighted because at that point we knew that we could start thinking really about the art gallery project, because it did give us that seed corn money that we needed to go to other places to get the 8 million. He obviously was a very keen collector. He'd bought most of it from auction in the south of England where he'd worked. And some of it was actually still in its original wrapping. Obviously some of it was on display in his house, but a lot of it was sort of in storage. And we started to work our way through it, and it became very evident that there was far, far, far too much for us to take on, and it wasn't really appropriate to take on as part of our permanent collection. So we had that sort of heart search about what to do with it, and we decided in the end to keep several pieces, largely Japanese prints because we already have a print collection, and 4 old master drawings because that sort of fitted with our collection as well, and a few other objects including a book about York, and just so we had a sort of what we would call a capsule collection that commemorated and referred to Peter Madsen for all time. And then we called in the auctioneers and they sorted it for us and said, these individual pieces are worth selling, and the rest of it would have really gone to local auctions and was not really worth a lot of money. So we then started to think about, if it wasn't worth that much money, could we do something a bit more creative with it?
I'm just trying to work out which walls have which paintings on them, and it's one of those things where when I just put them all down, it was fine and it all looked good. And then I started moving them around, and now I'm starting to think that none of them really go together, and I'm doubting myself as what kind of fits.
We always work with contemporary artists. It's interesting, and the idea was born to see if artists would be interested in utilising the collection in whatever way they wished to create new artworks.
I was invited to put a proposal forward for the Madsen project. Immediately I knew that it was going to be exactly the kind of thing that I wanted to do. Invited to work with objects that Madsen owned and were his personal property and from his own personal collection, and that is what I kind of do anyway in my own personal work. I like finding old bits and bobs in charity shops and car boot sales. Finding the value was a really appropriate project for me and exciting because there were a lot of things that I wouldn't normally have access to, and a lot more interesting objects than you would find in your average charity shop, really.
It was a very open brief in respects that I could do whatever I wanted to. When I came down, I sort of had these preconceived ideas of what that might be. So I thought, for instance, there might be a narrative that might be shown throughout the objects. Almost immediately upon seeing the collection, I came across this set of beautiful Japanese books, sort of hand-bound. I noticed that there were these perforations and markings inside of them, so like paper cuts, and they were so delicate. I thought they were an art piece. I thought an artist had done some paper cuts with them, but then upon further inspection we discovered that it must have been bugs that got inside of them, or bookworms. And I don't really know how it came about, but through the research and through the research of finding out what insects do, I came across silkworms and this idea that these silkworms would spin silk and create these cocoons, and it very soon came about mending these books. The way that they work is that you have to really nurture these worms for about 4 weeks. During all of this time they ooze this silk, which is actually their saliva, so it's actually part of them, and it's like this trail that's left behind. And so I started to place them on the papers in the books, and they started spinning around the books themselves, and there were parts where there's broken spines and there's been that element of control where they've moved on and I've brought them back and placed them again. It's like making paper silk, really. They spin in this figure of 8 motion over and over and over again. So they create like a piece of paper, essentially. So I was able to kind of peel that off and wrap that around the book. So it is very much guided by me. It is a controlled experience, I think.
Peter Madsen, through the solicitor, did give us, carte blanche to do what we liked with it. I mean, we haven't contravened any of his requests for his bequest. He obviously realised we wouldn't take it all on because it was huge. Nor did he give us any constraints, which again was a sign of his generosity, really.
It very quickly became clear that there was this intrigue about the people that had donated it. And you only had to ask a couple of questions, and nobody knew anything, because they hadn't been donated anonymously, but there'd been no contact. There was no photographs, and there's almost nothing on the internet. So these people, within a matter of 18 months or a couple of years, had more or less disappeared completely without any evidence of them, and yet they'd made this huge donation to York, and we were supposed to respond to it, and yet the people themselves had disappeared. Well, I've always been fascinated with boxes and collections and things that move a bit. So, I have a sort of collection of clocking in clocks and animated toys and things, and it sort of progressed into making contemporary automata. I do like religious art, especially Roman Catholic. There's all that kind of gold and elaboration and saints and things. And so the idea of a triptych came about. And the triptychs quite often have the donors somewhere in the crowd. Here's a picture of me, asking the saint to put a good word in for me. So to have all these crowds of pictures, of flat pictures and 3D objects, and you don't know which one's the donor and which one isn't, that idea evolved.
That one's there. Yeah, so this one goes in. One of the things that I found is that whenever a figure is involved in a painting, that becomes the focus of the painting. I kind of think that quite often there's other stuff within a painting which is of equal interest or actually could unlock other kind of potentials. So I get rid of the figure and I replace it with this kind of crystalline, triangular structure of different colours. And sometimes the colours relate to what was in the original piece, sometimes they're something that's completely alien from it, but it's supposed to kind of be this other presence. So it takes away the figure, but you're very aware of that the figure is there. You just don't have the particularities of what that figure represented. For me, it's a bit like when you walk along a high street and you see the chains of shops, and then you look up and you see this amazing architecture that's hidden at ground level. And I guess it's a little bit like looking up and noticing what you don't normally see kind of day to day. And when the Madsen opportunity came away, then there was this fact that all of these things were part of a collection, and so had a kind of a value, a worth that meant something to Peter. And so that was kind of an important kind of opportunity for me, that I was given permission to paint over these things.
I think the Susie MacMurray piece called Legacy is interesting because she has encapsulated objects. She's transformed them, but they still remain objects, but they're obscured by the wire, the gold wire that she has wrapped them in. And they look like a little gift, the pile of gifts underneath the Christmas tree. They have a sort of glitter about them and a preciousness about them, but we don't know what's inside them. And that's a very nice metaphor, I think, for the whole process of being given a collection. We didn't know what was in it. We looked at it, we unpacked it. She's almost sort of reversed the whole thing.
What I've tried to create is what I envision Madsen would have had some of the pieces of from his collection displayed like in his own home. So that's why the walls are papered, and I've chosen specifically anaglypta wallpaper, which is quite old-fashioned. It's more a bit of a personal exploration because there are no photographs of what his house was like when they went to retrieve the collection. That was really curious to me. I would have loved to see how he had them. I think a lot of them were in storage, but if he did have some on display, I've no idea what it was like. So it's my personal little fantasy daydream that this might have been what kind of character he was and how he might have displayed them.
By having these 5 artists create new works, have we added value to these objects that Peter Madsen purchased? Is that value about the cultural significance of them via the imaginations of the artists? Are they worth more money than we would have been able to realise if we put them through the local auction? We would probably never know, of course, but we could probably give it a good guess. So they are for sale, most of them. It'll be interesting to see if anybody finds enough value in them that they will buy them and continue the Madsen collection in some small way in its different format.